I'm now pleased to invite our Secretary General of the European University Institute, Vincenzo Grassi, to introduce our next speaker.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, let me say as Secretary General of the European University Institute some words to thank all the people who make the State of the Union possible. Organizing such an event is certainly easier than building a People's Europe, but is nevertheless a challenge. So thanks to all my colleagues in the European Institute, to the municipality of Florence that allow us to use this wonderful location, to all local authorities, Prefettura, Questura, Forze dell'Ordine, and to our national and European supporters like the Fondazione Cassa di Risparmio di Firenze. This morning, the President of the European University Institute has reminded how pluralism is a crucial element of intellectual freedom and academic excellence. Other outstanding speakers underlined the enormous success of the enlargement process for the European Union. New member states gave to Europe original perspectives and enhanced dynamism. This is true also for the European University Institute. We are therefore proud to have here tonight President Kersti Kaljulaid, who will present and then discuss with Tony Barber priorities and views of the first Estonian presidency of the European Union Council starting next July. Our gratitude is even stronger because due to the bad weather condition, the trip of the President to Florence yesterday was rather adventurous. Yet she managed to come here. So, ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to join me in warmly welcoming President of Estonia, Kersti Kaljulaid. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. Let me begin by thanking the European University Institute for inviting me to speak here today. I am honored to speak to you about the upcoming Estonian Council presidency and to share with you some thoughts on how the future of our union looks from the northeast corner of Europe. But first, a little case study that proves that responsible national policies can result in the recognition of the EU's values by the wider public. It is important to give the EU its due recognition for the possibilities it offers to us national policymakers. And it is just as important not to blame Brussels for things that go wrong. People in Estonia do look at our union with trust. And this is because all Estonian governments have said so. They can. This messaging is even more important than EU support schemes. For as we know, countries that receive equal and high levels of EU support can highly differ in their public analysis of the Union. Therefore, money is not defining the attitudes of people. Ideals, they are. The EU has had considerable overall success in driving economic convergence. If we look at where we were in 2004 and where we are today, then the numbers do speak for themselves. Estonians are 2.4 times better off than at joining. But as I already said, it is not all about money. The GDP of all 10 member states who acceded to the EU in 2004 has increased on average 1.9 times. No one has been left out. Everybody has progressed. All of the countries who joined in 2004 are better off. And by the way, almost all of the states who were in the European Union before 2004, they are also better off. This is mainly due to the opportunities offered by new markets and better cost structuring for enterprises. And yet, despite the obvious economic gains, The EU's popularity is wavering in many countries, and this is happening because of the political messaging about it. Harmful words, they are not free, as countries have started to find out. Indeed, it is very difficult to criticize the EU and at the same time claim that it is a very useful union. The message is simply incoherent and therefore not believable. The problem is not that people get the EU wrong, but rather that they are getting confusing signals about it. And this is our fault, the politicians' fault, if we do so. In Estonia, we make a point of not blaming Brussels for potentially unpopular decisions. We tell our people that solidarity works both ways. For example, even if Estonia had no previous experience with accepting refugees, and we were therefore off to a rocky start once the joint decision on burden sharing was adopted, we accepted our fair share. We put in place a system offering people a new home in Estonia. We made a point of explaining to refugees what the economic conditions of our country are, what they can expect, and we built this system from the scratch in a year, and we are doing well in fulfilling our quota. Estonia has also always supported a stronger role for the EU globally. The EU does a lot of good in the world, but we talk too little about it. It is not well known. We should be proud. I am hopeful that the new EU global strategy will prove useful in not only strengthening the EU, its common foreign and security policy, but also at helping to boost the EU's image both abroad and at home as well. Ladies and gentlemen, in less than 2 months, Estonia will assume the presidency of the Council of the European Union. It will be our first. We planned for a presidency at the beginning of 2018, 6 months later, but when the UK voted to leave the EU, we needed to step up and took over the UK's slot. We take on our presidency with a very strong sense of responsibility, but also with enthusiasm. And we have set ourselves some very ambitious goals. We aim at a European Union that is competitive, prosperous, and also secure. We are determined to keep Europe safe, but also open to the outside world, including its immediate neighborhood. And of course, being Estonia, there is the horizontal digital aspect of practically every policy goal of the EU that we want to highlight. Digital seemed to surface all by itself in preparation for our presidency, which shows, by the way, that without most EU citizens even recognizing it, the EU is turning into a digital society. There are already horizontal digital aspects to many EU policies, including security, EU LISA and exchange of data, free trade and sustainable development. In both the Eastern Partnership and the neighbourhood policy more widely, there is a strong digital aspect. It is related to fighting corruption and strengthening the rule of law, since you cannot bribe a computer. But just as others are determined to make Estonian presidency about all things digital because they believe we can do it, we ourselves are rather determined that our presidency does not take merely a technocratic approach. Our goal is to take an empathetic, constructive view of the future of Europe. I do realize that positive talk about the EU is not that common these days. It is much more fashionable, both in and outside of the Union, to worry about EU's weakening potential to disintegrate or demise. Admittedly, there are forces, both internal and external, which do threaten to pull the EU apart. But since the EU is normally developing through various crises, And there is no better means of sorting this continent than assembling in Justus Lipsus for some active verbal combat. The EU is actually much more resilient than we do give it credit for. The EU always has a way of muddling through, even if the solutions reached are often neither ideal nor elegant. But they are sufficient. They've always been sufficient. It is simple common sense, even if common sense is not mentioned in the treaty. Neither is muddling through, but in my humble opinion, they should both be somewhere there. During our presidency, our aim, of course, is to do more than just muddle through. We worked hard to get into the European Union. The last thing that we want is to see it weaker. We are sad to see it weakened by undeserved criticism. We want it to prosper by constructive analysis of its values and indeed fault lines as well. And so we have decided to place unity at the heart of our presidency, because now more than ever we can see that Europe needs to come together, to consolidate and to act. Of course, this is easier said than it is done, but by no means it should be impossible to achieve. After all of the EU core policies, the single market, common trade policy, Schengen, they remain strong and intact. The euro area's technical structures actually developed quicker during the euro crisis than they could by mere political deliberation of calm economic waters. The same is now happening to Schengen and securing our borders. Indeed, if we look at the past years, then we see that the EU has managed to remain united on all the issues which really matter. For example, we agreed very quickly, like a flash, on our position on Article 50 to start negotiations for UK leaving our union. Or another example, how EU managed to mobilize and take a united stand on Russia's actions with sanctions. These demonstrate that the unity can and does pull together our union when fundamental interests and values are at stake. Meanwhile, and this is also on the positive side, other policy areas, like the EU's common foreign policy and defence cooperation, they are being strengthened. During our presidency, we will work to take these discussions further forward. We will also do our best to implement the EU-NATO strategic partnership, which, given the uncertainty surrounding us, is more necessary than ever. And we will, of course, work tirelessly on strengthening the all-important transatlantic relationship. As presidency, we will also pay more attention to the creation of a prosperous and competitive Europe, which can only be built on a strong economy. This means being both open and innovative. As I already said, we have had strong peer pressure to make one of our 4 presidency priorities the creation of a digital Europe. But we do not want to focus too much on the technological aspects of becoming digital, rather on the steps that are needed to change our societies to be ready to be digital societies. We need to reach this stage where people throughout Europe start to complain when they have to communicate with their public sector in an analog format. This, then, would be the real sign of societal change and transformation, which we can say means we cannot turn back anymore. This would be a sign that people have started to trust digital services, that they value the savings in time and money, that digital solutions can be trusted by people. What do we need to do to reach this stage? People need digital services that work every time when they try. But they also need very good cyber hygiene. They must learn how to protect themselves in cyberspace. You know, we all drive cars on highways. We know there are risks involved, but the key is to take adequate safety measures. It is exactly the same when we are talking about the digital sphere and the cyber. Let's face it, cybercrime is here to stay, but we cannot let criminals put our governments and people off from using technology any more than we accept criminals gaining the advantage on the streets. Security and safety are at the forefront on people's minds today, not only in the cyber world, unfortunately. This is therefore also a non-negotiable priority for our presidency. It takes real-time info exchange systems to achieve this. There must be no limiting administrative measures born out of distrust of technologies to keep us from achieving our aim. And finally, our fourth priority is an inclusive and sustainable Europe. We believe that the four freedoms of the European Union can function well only in a truly complete single market. This must go hand in hand with a sustainable social dimension. But the four freedoms function better in an environment less focused on rules and more on principles, which must be commonly agreed. I would not like to finish without chiming in on the main topic of this conference, the future of our union, the union of our citizens, our people and their freedoms. I would like to put forward some thoughts on our next biggest challenge in Europe, which we seem to be quite late in recognizing. These are changes in society which are related to technological development. They are only starting, and they are much bigger than simply refusing to communicate on paper with governments. Today, they may only affect some 5% of the workforce, but it will be much more quite soon. We must pay especially close attention to the global trends in modern information society that continue to change our jobs and lifestyle. Here, Europe should seize the opportunity to use technological changes to our advantage. We have a competitive edge over anybody else here because we share already so many freedoms, as were demonstrated by Michel Barnier while he was talking about Brexit, but he was really also explaining what kind of freedoms we really enjoy, and also later by the video we saw. We have a competitive advantage to be ready for the center of the 21st century, but we cannot miss it. We have to start talking about it today. We need to talk about societal changes that do affect the social dimension as well as the EU's competitiveness. The issues that were relevant when the Commission launched the public consultation on the pillar of social rights, they still hold true. Technological developments, aging society, changes in family and work patterns, new forms of work, skills mismatches, to name only a few. People are not only working longer, but they are also doing much diverse kind of works. I do see that we are also on the brink of a big and rather challenging societal change, which we have no time to contemplate, as it is gradual and never acute. But if ignored, it will definitely lead to an overall decrease of European competitiveness. Industrial jobs are vanishing, as once did agricultural ones. Yet, our social models are built on an industrial way of thinking, which no longer fits with the intermittent, global and fragmented nature of new jobs. The individualism of the new economy, where everyone is an employer, employee, works for different companies at the same time, and offers their services in more than one country at the same time, maybe even globally. All of this warrants a strong rethink of how we gather taxes in the future. As I like to say, the Cheshire cat will be gone, but the grin will not linger much longer like it did in the Alice in Wonderland book. We are used to getting wide aggregated streams of tax money from big companies, both payroll and income, and we bicker sometimes among ourselves and globally about who should get the tax revenue. In the future, we will face a world where independent people sell their time and skills globally, maybe never establishing a stable working relationship for long periods, working only part of the year or taking gap years at a pace which will make them lose social security network under our current conditions. If governments do not adapt to these lifestyle and work style changes, we will lose people from the system because they will opt out of the payments. We must now figure out how to capture our people with an offer of a social model which will respect and accept their life and work style choices. As I said, I believe Europe is best placed to be the sandbox of this new emerging social model. This cannot be done by restrictive measures and administrative limitations, but only by support and encouragement of the new lifestyles. We need to be prepared so that the transformation from industrial collective work to fragmented technologically enhanced jobs will not be as brutal to lower earners as the transfer from agricultural and to industrial mass employment was. We do not know yet how we will do it, but I am quite convinced that we must and we will succeed in adapting. 184 days to solve all of the challenges that Europe faces during our presidency. This is not a long time. But just like every other presidency, we will do our best to move forward an agenda that we believe will make the EU stronger, safer, more prosperous. The EU has many advantages and tools. Let us put them to better use, concentrating on issues which by their nature cannot be better resolved by member states individually. And please, let's all keep an eye on those issues that are about the future of our citizens, the issues which you have been debating here yesterday and today as well, because this is about our children and grandchildren. I much prefer to think about the future of our children and grandchildren than just the next multi-annual financial perspective. Thank you for listening.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Tony Barber from the Financial Times, and we're just going to have about, I think, 10 minutes or so of questions from me to the President, because we have, as I'm sure you're all aware, a very distinguished guest who arrived in the last 15 minutes or so, and who you're all most anxious to hear from. So let me start, President, by putting the first question this way. You mentioned that you wanted Estonia's presidency to be forward-looking. But speaking as someone who first visited Estonia in the late 1980s, I cannot help but sometimes look back a little bit and say what an absolutely extraordinary transformation this is. And EU membership has clearly been a very effective component of the later part of that change, the last 13 years or so. Do you feel now comfortable that the former divide between Western and Central and Eastern Europe has gone? Does everybody feel comfortable in their skin, so to speak, now in one united Europe? You placed an emphasis in your speech on the theme of unity.
First of all, as I already said, it is indeed true that our country has been transformed by the European Union membership, as everybody else who joined 2004. But it is equally important to keep this in mind, that most of the other countries also are better off since enlargement. I think this is very important. We have all gained because we have had a bigger union. I don't want to, never miss a chance to stress that. The divide between East and West, well, I have to say, I don't know what is this divide. What are you talking about? I mean, Estonians and Finns, for example, speak almost the same language. They joined the EU at different times. Neither is a founding member of the EU, for example. Where was there to be a divide ever before 2004 or 2004? Different dishes, draw different division lines, and it's normal. And I think that is the value of the European Union, that we do know how to put those issues where we differ on one side and still go on with the different issues where we can agree, at the path at which we can agree. This is the biggest value of the European Union, that it does create a platform for governments to come together and talk and negotiate what we can do together, so that every government back home can go there and work for the better life of their people, their freedoms, their better social systems, etc. This is their responsibility. In Brussels, we come together to make it better for all of us. It's an enabling body, the EU. It's not the body which takes the responsibility off from national governments.
You mentioned that one Estonian government after another has taken care to present the EU to the Estonian public as a positive thing. Is there a lot of public awareness of the forthcoming presidency of the Council? Are there events going to be held around the country?
Yes, definitely. And we were very proud as a nation when we realized that nobody in European Union doubted that we can do it when our presidency was moved forward by 6 months in 1 year's notice. Because this showed to us that we have truly arrived in the heart of the European decision-making. People put that much trust into us that they believe we can quickly adapt and be ready 6 months earlier. And our people, I can tell you, are widely proud of it. And our people indeed recognize and know that there will be the EU Council presidency. They do think about it, of course, also in the terms of traffic jams, etc. But nevertheless, everybody is eager to have you all come over to Estonia for, more than 200 events, conferences, seminars.
Now, one thing you mentioned was something that's almost becoming a little bit of a cliche, actually, which is that Estonia is famous internationally for its rapid move towards a digitalized society and the economy. There are worse things to be famous for, one can say. But part of the story about pushing this forward at an EU-wide level is to extend and deepen the single market, isn't it? I mean, how will Estonia try and attract attention and put focus on extending and deepening the single market?
One issue we definitely undertake is to trying to add, whether under this name or somehow in a simpler format, the fifth freedom, the digital freedom, to the European freedoms. And we believe without that we cannot really move forward, because we can see that our citizens, when they deal with private world, private companies, private enterprises, they deal with them cross-border and they deal with them online. And we are still, in a lot of our thinking, territorial. There's no territory in this. Therefore, we need to adapt. And if we can drive this societal change to a certain extent further, it would be very useful. It is normally quite useless to talk about digital Estonia to people who are not Estonians, because it's not technology, it's societal change what we have, and this change is exactly this. We do know that cyber can be risky, but we do know that we need to protect ourselves and still keep using it. We want the rest of the Europe to achieve the same, because otherwise we are losing the attention of our people. We know they are online, we should be online as well.
Now, it is interesting, I think, that in your speech you made a passing reference to the Eastern Partnership, the more broadly neighbourhood policy. In a way, these are some of the really serious challenges facing the EU, aren't they? I mean, if the EU succeeds in stabilising its borders in Eastern Europe or North Africa, then it's showing that it's doing a good job. I wondered whether you had given some thought to the enlargement process, and in particular the Western Balkans, and whether Estonia would try and do anything to raise the profile of that issue during its presidency.
It would be immoral of us to say that we are in the bus, let's close the doors and drive on. So indeed, Estonia remains a supporter of further enlargement. About Eastern Partnership, we're organizing an Eastern Partnership Summit and doing it in Brussels. We think it's highly symbolic to show that this is the issue which does concern the rest of the Europe as well, not only us, and we are seeking as concrete as possible results from that summit. They may be small steps, but they need to be firm and concrete. And also, both which concerns Eastern Partnership countries and Balkan countries, we should insist that they are able to come closer to the European Union. But at the same time, we should also insist that the rule of law persists and that the corruption is something which needs to be fought with. There we will be definitely adamant, because we know from our own experience that the only way to quickly transform is to be not only free market, but also a country where you can go to the court against the government and win, where the media is absolutely free to talk about whatever they want and, well, in general sense, be normal liberal democracy. This actually, we feel, has added to our economic prosperity, that we have achieved that, so we are adamant that these messages are driven through. I read an audit by the European Court of Auditors which said that Europe has had some progress in helping to build institutions in Balkan countries, but has not had such a good progress in inciting the developments to make sure that there is fight against corruption and that the rule of law prevails, which might mean that effectively with the EU help we have created a stronger stage which are still not applying these principles which we would hope they would. We should point it out, and we should try to coerce these countries that to their own prosperity they need to be more like us in their respect of liberal democratic values, because European Union is a value-based union, and helping other people to understand that this is the foundation of the European prosperity is our important role in this world.
Very good. Well, we're almost out of time, so I'll just close with one final question, which is, here you are, you're just slightly under 2 months away from the Estonian presidency. On December the 31st, at the end of this year, what will you look back on and say, this is what made a successful presidency?
That we should come together, let's say on 1st of January, somewhere in the conference room, and we would not say anymore, well, you know, Europe is in such a crisis and disarray, and it doesn't know where to go. After all, when exactly has the world been completely peaceful and harmoniously developing? It never has. European Union is at a great shape, and we need to say so very loud and very clear. We are ready to do so. So if there is less questioning about what we have already and more talk about what we need to do for the future, we would be very happy.
Thank you very much. Well, I think that concludes this section of the late afternoon's entertainment. So we can leave the stage and
Thank you all for listening.